Ever wonder how close cinema history came to never happening? One missed bus, one spilled commissary coffee, one burst ankle, and suddenly the screen lights up with Lana Turner, John Wayne, Shirley Mlan. Between the 1930s and mid-60s, a dozen-plus careers that now look inevitable were sealed by pure chance, each mishap stamped in studio ledgers. Boris Caroff grabbed lunch and walked out the Frankenstein monster. Vivien Lee only strolled past a bonfire of old sets before becoming Scarlett O'Hara. Tonight, we track 16 documented accidents that toppled casting directors, rewrote box office records, and proved fate holds the real power of Final Cut. Number 1. Lana Turner. On a warm February afternoon in 1936, 15-year-old Judy Turner slipped out of typing class at Hollywood High School, her Angora sweater tight against the California sunshine. She walked 2 blocks to the Top Hat Cafe, slid onto a counter stool, and ordered a Coca-Cola. At a nearby table, Billy Wilkerson, publisher of The Hollywood Reporter and kingmaker to the stars, glanced up from his own soda. What caught his eye wasn't just beauty, but a particular quality of light, the way sunbeams seemed to bounce off her platinum hair and settle into a halo. Wilkerson scribbled a note, pressed it into her hand, and said 6 words that would change cinema forever. "If you're interested in movies, call this number." Turner later recalled, "I thought he was fresh, but my mother said we should check it out anyway." That phone call led to a screen test at Warner Brothers, a 7-year MGM contract, and a first-day bit part in They Won't Forget that sent newspapers nationwide into a frenzy about the sweater girl. The Los Angeles Times devoted 3 columns to her walk across a courthouse square, all of 30 seconds of screen time. Hollywood myth insists the cafe was Schwab's pharmacy. Turner herself fought this fiction her entire life, always correcting interviewers. It was the Top Hat, a little place nobody remembers anymore. But the essential fact remains unchanged. A truant's sugar craving sparked one of cinema's most enduring careers. For the next decade, Turner oscillated between ingenue melodramas and nightclub scandals that kept her name in gossip columns. Yet the accidental discovery stayed central to her mystique. MGM publicists posed her at countless soda fountains for fan magazines, deliberately fueling the fantasy that lightning could strike twice. "Have your Coke at 3 p.m. It worked for Lana," read one Hollywood studio magazine caption beneath a staged recreation. By 1948, MGM's box office accountants calculated that Turner movies were grossing higher per theater than Bette Davis or Joan Crawford, a marketing triumph built on an unplanned soda break. When Life magazine asked about her success in 1950, Turner downplayed acting coaches and voice lessons. "Nothing taught me more than that moment when life decided for me." In an era of tightly scheduled star farms and contractual obligations, her story reminded teenagers nationwide that a single skipped class might be the boldest career move of all. "I've spent my whole life trying to live up to a moment I wasn't even prepared for," she once confided to columnist Hedda Hopper. How do you stop an accident? Number 2. John Wayne. Before he was the Duke, Marion Morrison hauled furniture at Fox Films' prop department for $35 a week. A decent wage in Depression-era Hollywood, but hardly the path to stardom. Throughout 1929, he'd watch from behind the scenes as genuine cowboys were trucked in for Western shoots, never imagining he'd one day become the genre's defining face. In midsummer, director Raoul Walsh was frantically preparing an epic 70mm wagon train Western called The Big Trail. Walsh had just lost his first-choice star, Gary Cooper, to Paramount, and was pacing the lot when he spotted the 6'4" prop boy guiding a team of mules across the back lot, his shoulders squared against the burden. "What's your name, son?" Walsh called out. "Morrison, sir," came the reply, "but they call me Duke." Walsh studied his gait, the slow, purposeful stride that would later become cinema shorthand for American resolve, and ordered a screen test on the spot. Without consulting the studio heads, Walsh renamed him John Wayne and handed him a role that required writing, rope work, and carrying a 140-pound 70mm camera rig up Zion National Park's treacherous cliffs. As film historian Robert Osborne noted, no trained actor would have attempted the stunts Walsh demanded of this novice. Perhaps that's why it worked. The Big Trail flopped catastrophically in its original wide-gauge release, Only 126 theaters nationwide had equipment capable of projecting the format, but the accident of Walsh's prop room casting gave the Western its most enduring silhouette. For 5 wilderness years, Wayne slogged through B pictures, with titles forgotten by all but the most dedicated film archivists. Yet the raw physicality Walsh glimpsed eventually met John Ford's poetic vision in Stagecoach. Wayne never forgot his origins in the prop shed. He kept his first prop saddle mounted in his Malibu house and quipped to reporters, "I'm still hauling furniture across the country, only now the furniture talks back." Industry historians cite the moment as proof that the studio backlot, teeming with unseen labor, was Hollywood's real casting office. Walsh himself was philosophical. Sometimes what you need isn't in the script or the casting call. Sometimes it's moving your scenery. Years later, when Wayne was receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom, he reportedly whispered to President Ford, "Not bad for a guy who got his start because some director needed to yell at somebody about a mule." Number 3. Shirley Mlan. Broadway Choreen. Shirley Mlan, making $54 a week in the chorus line of the Pajama Game, understudied scene stealer Carol Haney with little expectation of ever going on. Every night, she'd watch from the wings as Haney brought down the house with steam heat, memorizing each move while knowing her chance might never come. Then came the evening that would rewrite her destiny. One muggy June night, Haney shattered her ankle mid-dance during the first act. Backstage panic ensued as stage manager Jack Mann raced through the wings shouting, "McLean, get dressed, now!" She was thrust on with 5 minutes' notice, still war-painted with Haney's eyeshadow, her own dance shoes untested on the slick stage. "My heart was in my throat," McLean recalled decades later, "but there's something about knowing it's your only shot that clarifies the mind wonderfully." In row G sat producer Hal Wallace, pausing in New York before sailing for Europe. He'd come to observe other performers, but couldn't take his eyes off the red-haired 20-year-old who high-kicked like Eleanor Powell, yet blinked with a child's wonder between flourishes. When the curtain fell, Wallace fought through stage door crowds, wrote a provisional contract on theater stationery, and cabled Paramount's head office. "Sign her before I sober up." The telegram, preserved in Paramount's archives, reveals Wallace's additional note. "This one's different, not pretty like the others. Something better." Within days, McLean flew to Hollywood for Hitchcock's pastoral black comedy, The Trouble with Harry. She arrived in borrowed pumps, having pawned her own to pay the previous month's rent. Her entire Pajama Game weekly salary would equal 1 day's per diem on the film set, a fact that made her physically ill with anxiety on the first morning of shooting. "Hitchcock took one look at me and knew," she told The New Yorker. "He said, 'You're terrified because you think this is a fluke.' And I nodded, and he said, 'My dear, all of Hollywood is a fluke. The trick is to be ready when your fluke arrives.'" McLean internalized the understudy's code, script always in purse, suitcase always half-packed, and that readiness defined a career of sudden tonal shifts, from conspiratorial mistress in The Apartment to mystic pilgrim in Steel Magnolias. Asked later about destiny versus chance, she laughed. "If Carol hadn't broken her ankle, I'd still be in the chorus line, and Hal Wallace would still be sober." Sometimes your big break is somebody else's bad day. Number 5. Audrey Hepburn. In 1951, director Thorold Dickinson was running routine screen tests for Roman Holiday at Pinewood Studios. Ballet-trained but film-inexperienced Audrey Hepburn arrived for her appointment, recited a few scripted lines, performed a graceful curtsy, and waited for the customary, "Thank you, we'll be in touch." But Dickinson did something unusual. He kept the cameras rolling after the formal test ended, dimmed the stage lights, and casually asked, "Tell me about the war, Miss Hepburn. What was it like for you in Holland?" Unaware she was still being filmed, Hepburn's practiced poise melted. She spoke of hiding from Nazi patrols in cellars, of grinding tulip bulbs for flour when food ran out, of watching her uncle be executed in the town square, and of dreaming of dance shoes she could never afford. Her voice cracked, tears welled but never fell. For 7 unscripted minutes, the camera captured what no rehearsed reading could reveal: dignity forged in suffering. The unbroken 1,000-foot reel traveled from London to Hollywood, landing on William Wyler's desk at Paramount Pictures. Wyler had been auditioning A-listers for weeks, including Elizabeth Taylor and Gene Simmons. He stopped the search that afternoon and wrote, "She is the princess," across the film can, signing off on a decision that mystified studio executives. When Hepburn reached Rome's Cinecittà studios for filming, Wyler gave her a single instruction that would shape her entire approach: behave as though you don't know the camera likes you. Her lack of Hollywood polish, stooped shoulders, unmanicured nails, uncertain smile, became the film's emotional core. The Academy Award followed, but industry gossip raged that Paramount had gambled its summer schedules on a girl who hadn't known she was auditioning. Wyler defended his choice to skeptical producers with 4 words: "That innocence cost nothing." He later expanded, "That innocence cost nothing and bought history. You can teach technique. You cannot manufacture the truth." Modern casting directors still circulate Dickinson's fly-on-the-wall reel at industry workshops as Exhibit A for the power of unscripted presence. The British Film Institute preserved it in 2003 as the moment when European art sensibility infiltrated American commercial cinema, all because a director decided to keep filming after the official test was complete. Number 6, Veronica Lake. On the set of I Wanted Wings, 19-year-old Veronica Lake leaned across a barroom table for what should have been a standard medium shot. She'd already earned minor notice in small roles, but nothing suggested stardom was imminent. As she delivered her line, her baby-fine blonde hair fell forward, obscuring her right eye and half her face. Before the script supervisor could call for a reset, director Arthur Hornblow Jr. yelled, "Cut! Keep it! That's gold! Do it again, exactly that way." The bewildered crew watched as he ordered the scene repeated with the hair deliberately arranged to create the same effect. Lake later admitted, "I thought he'd lost his mind." Who wants an actress you can only see half of? The answer, it turned out, was everyone. The peekaboo bang tested through the roof with enlisted men preview audiences who wrote comments like "mysterious blonde" and "can't stop looking at her" on preview cards. Paramount's marketing office immediately ordered war bond posters featuring the accidental fringe. Within weeks, hairdressers across America fielded frantic requests, despite wartime pin curl shortages. "I couldn't leave my apartment without women asking how I got my hair to do that," Lake told Modern Screen in 1943. "The truth was, it was an accident, and then it became my prison." By 1943, the hair had become such a national phenomenon that the U.S. War Production Board officially contacted Lake, begging her to alter the style. Too many female factory workers copying the look were catching their hair in machinery, causing serious injuries and production delays. In a rare moment of patriotic compromise from the notoriously difficult star, she competed for "So Proudly We Hail," appearing in publicity photos with her hair pinned back alongside the slogan, "Safety First." After the war, she returned to the signature veil, proving accidents can become brand assets, even when they begin as continuity errors. Though Lake would struggle with alcoholism, typecasting, and eventually poverty, the slip of hair remains the quintessential 1940s glamour shorthand, immortalized in Jessica Rabbit's cartoon silhouette and every Halloween femme fatale costume kit sold to this day. Paramount's in-house hairstylist Helen Hunt later reflected, "In 20 years of designing coiffures, I never once created something as lasting as what gravity did to Veronica's bangs in one unplanned moment." Number 7, Boris Caroff. June 1931. 44-year-old character, extra William Henry Pratt, stage name Boris Caroff, slumped in Universal Studios' commissary after shooting the forgettable potboiler graft. With 20 years of bit parts behind him and middle age settling in, Caroff had resigned himself to a career of atmosphere work, mostly as foreign villains in westerns, thanks to his British Indian heritage. As he picked at a sorry-looking sandwich, a production assistant approached. "Mr. Whale would like coffee with you." James Whale, fresh off the success of Waterloo Bridge, was the studio's rising directorial star. Over coffee, Whale studied Caroff's gaunt face and sunken eyes, then asked if he would screen test the next morning. "For a damned awful monster." Caroff nodded eagerly, unaware the role required 4-inch asphalt boots, green grease paint, and 12-hour makeup calls that would test the limits of human endurance. "I thought it was just another day job," Caroff told Radio Times decades later. "When Jack Pierce showed me the makeup sketches, I nearly bolted. But when you're hungry, you don't quibble about being ugly." Frankenstein premiered 5 months later, becoming the top-grossing horror picture of the decade and forever altering the commercial potential of the genre. The studio had initially courted bigger names. Bela Lugosi famously refused the role, objecting to the heavy padding and lack of dialogue. But Whale insisted he'd seen something in Caroff's hollowed cheeks beneath the commissary's harsh fluorescent lighting. Even Caroff's signature lumbering walk originated accidentally. The 40-pound asphalt boots and full-body padding dislocated his hip during the first week of shooting, producing the iconic flat-footed shuffle that playground children would imitate for generations. Whale kept the cameras rolling despite the injury, recognizing that the creature's painful movements added pathos to the monster. By 1932, Time magazine listed Caroff as both noun and verb for fright. A casual coffee break had transformed a partly employed bit player into Halloween's patron saint and Universal's most bankable monster. When asked about his sudden fame at age 44, Caroff was philosophical. "Sometimes one must play dead for decades before being resurrected as the living dead." Number 8. Clark Gable. In 1933, MGM chief Louis B. Mayer, irritated by Clark Gable's salary demands and rumored affair with Joan Crawford, decided to teach his rebellious star a lesson. He loaned Gable to Columbia Pictures, then viewed as poverty row in the studio hierarchy, for a project most considered beneath an actor of his stature. Director Frank Capra handed the resentful star a low-budget screwball comedy titled It Happened One Night. According to production memos, Gable arrived late to the set, refused script rehearsals, and in one legendary act of spite, shaved his chest hair to undermine a scene where he removes his shirt, an act he knew would horrify the wardrobe and makeup departments who expected the king of Hollywood to appear appropriately masculine. He was determined to sabotage it, Capra recalled in his autobiography. "Every suggestion I made, he'd counter with, 'That's not how we do it at Metro.'" Yet somehow, the breezy road trip chemistry with co-star Claudette Colbert transcended the behind-the-scenes tension. The film delivered the first clean sweep of the top 5 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, and Screenplay. Ironically, MGM publicity trumpeted the triumph in trade papers, glossing over their original intent to humble their difficult star. When King George V reportedly named Gable the Clark of Hollywood after a royal screening, Mayer had no choice but to double his weekly pay to keep him from defecting to Columbia permanently. Capra later mused, "Punishment is sometimes God's shortcut to destiny." The film's hitchhiking lesson scene, where Gable demonstrates various thumb techniques to an increasingly amused Colbert, is still taught in screenwriting classes as mastery of meet-cute structure, a masterclass delivered by an actor who hadn't wanted to be there in the first place. When Gable returned to MGM, something fundamental had changed. "He came back knowing he could survive anywhere," said MGM cinematographer William Daniels. "That's the most dangerous kind of actor, one who isn't afraid anymore." Number 9. Vivien Lee. After 2 years, 1,400 screen tests, and a $50,000 national talent search, producer David O. Selznick still lacked the one element his Gone with the Wind adaptation couldn't proceed without: Scarlett O'Hara herself. Studio correspondence reveals his growing desperation. "We've seen every actress in America. Are we to believe she doesn't exist?" On December 10, 1938, Selznick staged the epic Burning of Atlantis sequence, torching old sets to create background plates before his principal actress was even cast, a financially risky move that reflected the production's mounting costs. As 40-foot flames illuminated the night sky over Culver City, actor Laurence Olivier arrived on the periphery of the set, escorting his British lover, Vivien Lee. They'd come merely to watch the spectacle with Olivier's agent, Myron Selznick, the producer's brother. As the trio approached through the smoke, Myron Selznick whispered 6 words that would alter film history. "Hey David, here's your Scarlett O'Hara." Vivien's porcelain features caught the fire's reflection, and David O. Selznick later wrote in a memo to his financial backers, I took one look and knew she was the girl we've held up production waiting for. She'd read the novel twice during Atlantic crossings, but assumed her English accent doomed any serious consideration. 2 months of secretive tests followed before she officially signed the $25,000 contract. The transformation was grueling. Lee trained with dialect coach Wilfred Lathrop for 12 hours daily to mask her London edges, survived 165 shooting days, contracted malaria on location, and endured Selznick's infamous nightly script rewrites. The Oscar followed, and Southern debutantes copied her 17-inch waist-cinching velvet dress for decades afterward. All because a director decided to recycle old sets in a bonfire visible for miles, attracting a curiosity seeker who happened to embody the literary heroine that had eluded Hollywood's concentrated efforts. Historian David Thompson argued it might be the most expensive coincidence in cinema, as the Atlanta fire sequence alone cost $25,000, a sum that would have funded entire B pictures at smaller studios. Number 10. Tippy Hedrin. November 22, 1961. Alfred Hitchcock sat in his Universal bungalow, absent-mindedly watching television between takes of Psycho's extensive publicity rounds. A Seago liquid diet commercial appeared, a standard 30-second spot featuring a blonde model in a sleek dress. The model tilts her chin, offers a glacial smile, and suddenly a flock of men in dark business suits chase her across Manhattan. Hitchcock froze, then reached for his phone. His assistant, Peggy Robertson, later recounted the call. He phoned Universal Casting and said, "Find the girl in that diet ad. I don't want to know her name until she walks into my office." It was so Hitchcock. The mystery was part of his process. The girl was Natalie "Tippy" Hedrin, a 31-year-old divorced model and single mother from Minnesota, with zero acting experience. She arrived at Universal believing she'd landed a Coca-Cola campaign. Instead, she was offered a 7-year exclusive contract and the lead in The Birds, one of the most physically demanding female roles in Hitchcock's repertoire. "I thought it was an elaborate prank," Hedrin wrote in her memoir, Who Gets Discovered by Alfred Hitchcock Watching Television. But the screen tests confirmed his instinct. Her poised exterior masked a coiled intensity that matched his vision for Melanie Daniels. Hedrin endured what would now be considered abusive working conditions. Live birds were attached to her costume with elastic bands, she suffered multiple facial lacerations requiring medical attention, and one shooting week stretched to 120 hours. But the opening scene of The Birds deliberately recreates the Seago ad shot for shot, Hitchcock's tribute to the serendipitous discovery. According to NBC's advertising archives, the commercial ran exactly once in its original form at 12:40 p.m. on NBC's midday programming block, making it arguably the costliest half-minute of airtime in film history. When Hedrin asked Hitchcock years later what would have happened if he'd been in the kitchen during those 30 seconds, he replied with characteristic coolness, "My dear, some things are simply meant to be." Number 11. Shirley Temple. In 1931, casting director Charles Lamont was scouting a Los Angeles dance studio for child performers when a 3-year-old curly-topped dynamo named Shirley Temple stomped through a military tap routine with unbreakable eye contact. While other children watched their feet or sought parental approval, Temple performed as though entertaining troops overseas. It wasn't that she was the best dancer, Lamont later told Temple biographer Ann Edwards. It was that she was the only one who understood she was in show business. Lamont immediately signed her to Educational Pictures' controversial Baby Burlesque's Shorts, parodies where toddlers in diapers and minimal costumes pretended to be Mae West or Marlene Dietrich. Parent advocacy groups condemned the series. Depression-weary audiences couldn't get enough of them. Theater owners reported patrons staying through features twice just to see the Temple shorts a second time. Fox Film Corporation executives noted the ticket lines and offered a $150 per week contract, an astronomical sum for a child performer during the Depression. By age 6, Temple's films represented 13% of Fox's entire studio income. President Roosevelt famously called her Little Miss Miracle for giving Americans something to smile about while waiting in bank queues during the financial crisis. Temple later wrote in her autobiography, Child Star, "Had my mother not needed a quiet hour to sew that Tuesday afternoon, I might never have learned to shuffle off to Buffalo." and American cinema might have sought its dimples elsewhere. The observation wasn't just charming, but economically significant. Film historians calculate that Temple's films saved Fox from bankruptcy between 1935 and 1938, allowing the studio to survive long enough to merge with 20th Century Pictures. As the Great Depression dragged on, Temple's signature song, "On the Good Ship Lollipop," sold 500,000 sheet music copies in a market where 100,000 was considered a runaway hit. The curls that framed her face weren't natural. They required nightly vinegar rinses and 56 precisely placed pin curls, a regimen her mother maintained with military precision. Behind the dimples, a business empire started because a casting director happened to visit a dance studio on a day when a particularly precocious 3-year-old refused to blend into the background. Number 12. Thelma Ritter, radio veteran. Thelma Ritter, age 41, visited friend and director George Seaton on location at Macy's department store during filming of the Christmas classic Miracle on 34th Street. She'd come simply to catch up over coffee, perhaps watch a scene or two from behind the cameras. Production that morning had fallen dangerously behind schedule. Seaton needed a weary holiday shopper to complain about a sold-out toy to advance the plot, but the hired extra had called in sick. As grips reset lights, Seaton spotted Ritter chatting with the costume designer. "Can you say a line on camera?" he called across the crowded sales floor. "I've been saying lines for 20 years on the radio," she replied. "Nobody's complained yet." With no time for script revisions, Ritter improvised the guilt trip line. "Listen, I've been standing here waiting since 8:30 this morning, and I'm getting kind of tired, mister." She delivered it with such authentic New York exasperation that the crew broke into spontaneous applause. Test audiences later roared at the brief moment, circling her performance on comment cards. Studio boss Darryl F. Zanuck, legendary for his story instincts, ordered the dailies replayed 3 times, then demanded her role be expanded despite the shooting schedule being nearly complete. Within days, Ritter had a 6-picture deal at 20th Century Fox, all from a casual visit that was supposed to end with coffee and industry gossip. Ritter's trademark New Yorker frankness would earn 6 Academy Award nominations, none resulting in wins, a record for actresses at the time, and define the smart-mouthed confident archetype for generations. Directors like Joseph Mankiewicz and Alfred Hitchcock built entire subplots around her caustic observations, recognizing that audiences connected with her unvarnished authenticity. When asked about her discovery at industry events, Ritter remained practical. "In New York, we don't call it being discovered. We call it finally being noticed after showing up every damn day." That blend of fatalism and perseverance became her on-screen signature, all because a friend invited her to visit a hectic film set on exactly the right morning. Number 13. Marilyn Monroe. In June 1945, U.S. Army photographer David Conover received unusual orders: tour the radioplane munitions plant in Van Nuys, California, to document female workers boosting wartime morale. The military publication Yank magazine needed wholesome images of the women keeping bombers supplied with unmanned aircraft and target drones. Conover noticed one brunette assembler on the line, carefully adjusting a propeller blade while softly humming Gershwin's "Someone to Watch Over Me." In his official report, he noted, "Subjects displayed natural photogenic qualities, uncommon in factory settings." That clinical assessment understated his reaction to Norma Jean Dougherty, a 19-year-old whose husband was serving in the Merchant Marine. Conover asked her to pose outside under natural light. The resulting photographs displayed a luminous quality that studio lighting specialists would spend years trying to replicate. The pinups hit Yank magazine's July edition, flooding Conover's office with modeling inquiries, not for other subjects, but specifically for the propeller girl. Her defense job vanished almost overnight. Aircraft orders were down as the war wound down, but modeling agency Blue Book Management raised her day rate to $5 plus hair tinting services. The transformation from brunette factory worker to blonde sensation happened gradually, but the career trajectory was set. 20th Century Fox executive Ben Lyon spotted the Yank spread in a stack of modeling portfolios, ordered a screen test, and suggested the alliterative stage name Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn, after Broadway star Marilyn Miller. Monroe, after President James Monroe, creating a name that suggested both glamour and American heritage. By 1953, she sang, "Diamonds are a girl's best friend" in Technicolor, and Life magazine called her the talk of American manhood from coast to coast. Conover's wartime photo assignment, 8 rolls of film, 20 minutes of shooting, had sparked the century's most analyzed celebrity persona, proving that propaganda and pin-ups can share a cradle. Film critic Molly Haskell later observed that Monroe's origin story represents the perfect American myth, a worker discovered in the act of honest labor, yet containing the seeds of extraordinary transformation. That the transformation began with a government propaganda assignment only deepens the irony, linking the military-industrial complex with the birth of post-war feminine iconography. Number 14. Esther Williams. Teenager Esther Williams held 3 national freestyle swimming titles and was officially ticketed for the 1940 Tokyo Olympics when world events intervened. The outbreak of World War II led to the game's cancellation, ending the athletic dreams she'd sacrificed her youth to achieve. "I cried for 2 days straight," Williams recalled to Sports Illustrated. "Then my father said, 'Crying won't bring back the Olympics. What else can you do with swimming besides waiting 4 more years?'" Devastated but practical, she joined Billy Rose's aquacade at the San Francisco World's Fair, replacing pregnant Olympic gold medalist Eleanor Holm as the lead water performer. The synchronized swimming spectacle was intended as a temporary paycheck, a way to utilize her skills until normal competition resumed. MGM talent scouts, trolling for wartime novelty acts to distinguish their slate from competitors, saw her perform a 1.5 gainer dive through a flaming hoop and cabled Culver City executives with 7 words that shaped the studio's next decade. "This girl swims like a man and looks like Hedy Lamarr." Studio craftsmen immediately built a 90 by 60 foot tank on stage 30, a custom pool still known as the Esther Williams tank on studio tours today. Williams spent more time in chlorinated water than on dry land for the next decade, single-handedly birthing a new genre, the aqua musical, that solved the problem of wartime audiences hungry for escapism while metal rationing limited elaborate set construction. Her debut vehicle, Bathing Beauty, outgrossed Meet Me in St. Louis and overseas markets, proving that swimming spectacle translated across language barriers when dialogue couldn't. In Brazil, she outperformed every other MGM star, including Clark Gable. Backyard pool installations across America tripled between 1945 and 1949, a direct ripple effect of dreams destroyed and reinvented. "I often wondered what would have happened if the Olympics had gone on as scheduled," Williams mused in her memoir. "I might have won a gold medal and come home to teach swimming at a country club. Instead, I ended up with a career no one could have invented on purpose." Athletic historians note that Williams remains the only Olympic-caliber athlete to achieve greater fame by missing the games than she likely would have by competing in them, a peculiar footnote to a career built on the ashes of athletic disappointment. Number 15. Bert Lancaster. Brooklyn-born. Bert Lancaster never intended to act. His path to stardom began under the Big Top, where he and childhood friend Nick Cravat toured with the K Brothers Circus as acrobats. Their horizontal bar act earned steady pay until fate intervened with brutal efficiency. Lancaster shattered his wrist during a 1943 performance in Sarasota, Florida, ending his high-flying career instantly. "The human body forgives many things," Lancaster told journalist James Bawden years later. "A 30-foot fall onto packed earth isn't one of them." With his circus livelihood destroyed, Lancaster reluctantly sought straight acting jobs, using his only marketable skill, physical presence. In 1945, he landed a small role in the Broadway drama The Sound of Hunting, replacing an actor who'd fallen ill. The play received mediocre reviews and seemed destined for a short run, hardly the launch pad for Hollywood greatness. Yet, on the 3rd night, columnist turned producer Mark Hellinger sat in the audience. Hellinger, who'd just signed a deal with Universal Pictures, was known for his instinct for raw talent. During intermission, he sent a note backstage. "Don't leave after curtain call. We need to talk." After the show, Hellinger cornered Lancaster in his dressing room and asked, "Can you fight on camera the way you fly on a trapeze?" Lancaster, desperate for work, exaggerated his combat experience from brief military service. 2 months later, he was under contract to Universal for The Killers, a noir adaptation of Hemingway's short story that would define American cinema's post-war mood. Director Robert Siodmak, a German émigré with an eye for shadow and movement, exploited Lancaster's panther-like physicality and wounded gaze, creating the noir anti-hero template that would influence generations of filmmakers. Opening night reviews called him the most exciting unknown in decades, and a brooding presence unlike anything since Gable. His circus agility translated into prison break lunges and brute force in that immortal beach wrestling scene with Deborah Kerr in From Here to Eternity. Every epic leap traces back to a wrist injury and a producer who recognized that an ex-acrobat knew how to fall convincingly, perhaps the most essential skill in both circus arts and American masculinity. A broken bone led me to a whole life, Lancaster reflected during his AFI Lifetime Achievement ceremony. Every time I cashed a check, I thanked that broken wrist. Number 16. Greer Garson, London, 1937. Actress Greer Garson took her final bow after a lukewarm performance in the play Old Music at the Westminster Theatre. At 33, she was reaching the age when female stage careers often plateaued, and the evening's half-empty house suggested her prospects were dimming. As she prepared for the director's notes in her dressing room, a stagehand knocked. "Mr. Meyer of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer wishes a word at the stage door." Garson assumed a hosiery salesman or theater investor. Instead, she met Louis B. Mayer himself, vacationing in London and trolling West End stages for fresh faces that might translate to the American screen. Though the play had failed to impress critics, Mayer saw something in Garson's carriage and diction that suggested breeding and resilience, qualities MGM needed for their prestige literary adaptations. Mayer invited her, along with her mother as chaperone, a proprietary he insisted upon, to dinner at the Savoy. By dessert, he had offered a 7-year MGM contract with a starting salary that exceeded her annual theater earnings. Theater colleagues warned her that Hollywood was a factory system where British actresses were often brought over only to be shelved, but Garson saw few alternatives as European war clouds gathered. "I thought I might do one film and return to the stage," she told the Los Angeles Times decades later. "I never imagined becoming the emblem of British fortitude for American audiences." Garson spent 2 idle years in Beverly Hills finishing school, learning makeup techniques and camera angles, while MGM decided how to market their new acquisition. The wait ended when she was cast opposite Robert Donat in Goodbye, Mr. Chips, a role that earned her an Academy Award nomination and established her as the studio's go-to for literary adaptations. But it was the wartime morale booster Mrs. Miniver that cemented her image as the embodiment of noble British fortitude under fire. The film so effectively portrayed English civilian courage that Winston Churchill reportedly claimed it did more for the Allied cause than a flotilla of destroyers. Her Oscar acceptance speech remains the longest in Academy history at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, a record unlikely to be broken in the era of orchestral playoffs. Garson often joked to reporters, "I was discovered in the lobby, not on stage." Indeed, the doorman's polite insistence that she meet a visiting American altered studio history more profoundly than any audition could have. Had the stagehand decided the visitor seemed unimportant, or had Mayer left at intermission, one of cinema's most dignified presences might never have made it to the screen. Film historian David Thompson later wrote that Garson represented the perfect accident of time and place, a British actress discovered by an American mogul at precisely the moment when America needed a vision of British courage it could embrace from a safe distance. 16 stars, 16 slips of fate, coffee breaks, twisted ankles, bonfires, diet drink jingles. What they shared was preparation. Each could seize a chance the instant luck kicked open the door. Which accident was your favorite? Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip through Hollywood's serendipity files, hit like, share the video with the film buff in your life, and subscribe for more behind-the-curtain stories every week. Because on our channel, you never know which wrong turn will lead straight to stardom.